Alright, so we have 3 movies this week, so let's just dive right into that. Starting with Atomic Blonde, this new kind of Charlize Theron action movie from one of the directors of John Wick. That's pretty much the extent that I knew. I knew that McAvoy and John Goodman were in it, but apart from... And that it was going to kind of have this... It's based on a graphic novel and how it will have kind of this kind of 80s / graphic novel look. That's pretty much all I knew going in, and I kind of assumed it was going to be something pretty much akin to John Wick, like basically a movie that's advertised as the female John Wick. That's kind of what this is. Very, very loosely, I guess. But obviously we start off and we realize the kind of tone that we're going to get. It kind of reminded me of what Michael Bay did with Pain and Game, when it tells us it's a true story, and then later when Dwayne Johnson's grilling the hands, it says it again. In this particular case, it's the whole Reagan talking about Gorbachev tearing down the wall, and then it tells us the history lesson of what was going on then, and then we get the graffiti that says this is not that story. And you kind of think, okay, that's a little edgy, whether the good kind of edgy or bad, depends on you. And then we just go right into this story that kind of is all over the place. Because we have this opening scene, and then we jump to a different time period where we introduce Charlize's character silently while, you know, she's in the bathtub of ice and drinking, and she just kind of has this beaten, weathered look to her. And then we jump again. And then eventually a plot kind of takes place here, but our framing device here is her being interviewed by John Goodman and Toby Jones. And we go from there. And from then on, we kind of get a really not that interesting, pretty convoluted story that's basically trying to be buried by this, look how awesomely 80s and stylized this is, and how badass the fight scenes are and all that. It's a movie that really... It's funny that it's from one of the directors of John Wick, because this movie is like... It tries really, really, really hard to do what John Wick did effortlessly. And there's not a whole lot to really take away from that, especially with our lead character here, where when you hear about the concept and the character, Charlize seems like the perfect casting choice. The only trouble is that there's really not a whole lot to her. And even so, like, even if you want to play on, maybe it's more of a... She kind of has this intriguing coldness about her. Well, the coldness is there, but the intrigue, not so much. And that's pretty much... She pretty much remains that way through the whole movie, from beginning to end. There's only, like, one moment that gives us even a hint of some kind of emotion or humanity from her, where she doesn't just kind of seem like this vacant body that moves around and will occasionally fuck you up if she has to. And that's kind of trying on the whole movie, because you kind of have to depend... When your main character's like that, then it's up to the supporting characters to kind of liven up the proceedings. And McAvoy really does try. McAvoy could pretty much liven up anything. Like, he's amazing in Filth, which is a movie that I actually kind of hate it. And then there was... I actually legitimately like Victor Frankenstein, but 90% of that is because of McAvoy, so he can pretty much elevate just about anything. And he is a fun character to watch here, but even so, it's... The bar on that is so low. It was really disappointing because you see... One of this movie's errors is probably having an opening credit scene, because you see, like, you know, John Goodman, and that's exciting. You see, like, Til Schweiger and Toby Jones and Bill Skarsgård, and then you're like... You watch the movie and you're like, oh, Eddie Marsan as well. And it's like, all these interesting actors are just kind of playing these uninteresting characters. They don't really have a whole lot to do, and they don't really have a lot to show off with. So you're kind of falling short with your actors, you're falling short with your story. The only thing this movie has left is its style. Which, honestly, isn't that surprising when you think about it, but... So we go on and we see, like, the graffiti happens every time there's, like, a change in location or a change in time or whatever. Everything's got that really kind of slick blue, somewhat foggy look to it. It does capture the graphic novel look pretty well, but the general graphic novel. Like, I'm not familiar with the actual graphic novel this is based on, but apart from that, it's really kind of, like I was saying before, it's really, really trying hard to accomplish what it wants to do, and it's, the words I wrote down were calculated coolness, if that gets the point across, where it's, for starters, since it's set in the 80s, let's do the same thing all other movies do set in the 80s, set the mood with our soundtrack. So this movie just has a constant soundtrack of what's really funny and kind of takes away from this is, I feel like half the songs on this movie's soundtrack were in The Wedding Singer, and The Wedding Singer was trying to get the same point across, that it was the 80s. And it's really kind of an unwanted reminder when you're watching a lesser movie, when you hear the song from Cat People during the opening credits, and you see Til Schweiger's name. And it's like, you immediately associate that song, maybe with Cat People, but it was actually much more effectively used in Bastards, which Til Schweiger was in. So it kind of constantly reminds you that you should be watching a better movie. Another scene that does that is the movie theater scene, where it almost kind of felt like they were trying to recreate the fight in Skyfall, where you have the awesome background and the fight's kind of happening in silhouette in front of it. And in this particular case, they're in a movie theater that's playing Stalker. And the whole coolness of this scene is supposed to be that they're fighting while this is going on in the background. And kind of all I was thinking about anyway, was this whole fight is supposed to be cool and it's supposed to have this really great effect with the screen in the background. But all I could think was, this is unfortunately probably the closest I'm going to get for a long time to seeing Stalker on a movie screen, on a theater screen. It's like, or any Tarkovsky movie for that matter. And then it's like, oh yeah, a fight's happening. I don't care. And that's the problem, is it kind of sets up that let's try and be real cool about this. There's moments also where they try to use the soundtrack where they're playing the George Michael song, and she's kind of waiting. Kind of reminded me of the Russian scene in The Punisher. And she's just kind of waiting for them. And it's like, well, we know exactly how this scene's going to go. And it really kills the coolness factor, or any coolness factor that might have been there, because it just adds a whole predictability to everything, because she's just waiting behind the wall with her weapon, and the dudes are slowly coming in, and we can feel the song getting to where it's going to go, and it's like, okay, she's waiting for the chorus. She's waiting for the chorus until she attacks. Fine. And then it happens, and then it just kind of gives this whole predictable quality to this fight scene and just really takes away any effect it would have had. And talking about another thing where it's just really, really trying to show you just how stylized it can be and just how cool it is, and how cool these fight scenes are. There's this scene, of course, the long take scene in the middle. And once again, it's cashing in on the fact that long takes are just all the rage right now, especially in action movies, where it's like, because we live in a world where normal everyday action movies are so heavily edited and choppy looking that everybody creams their pants when you get a fight scene that doesn't have a lot of cuts in it, or none at all, like this one does. And so they were just gonna milk the absolute shit out of this. And obviously, you look at it and you want to praise it for the technical aspect of it, but at the same time, it's kind of like they're really just showing off at this point. Like, it doesn't. When you see the basically golden rule of the long take that everybody seems to know, or should know, is that if you're gonna do the long take, it's gotta have that. The whole point of the long take is to have that flow to it, and the best long takes are the ones that you don't notice. And this one just really, really loves drawing attention to itself. This scene desperately wants you to realize that it's a long take and how much they were able to fit in this take. And it really takes away from the effect that the scene is supposed to have. And it just keeps going and going. It got to the point to where when you watch, like, Quaron do Children of Men, and you just watch, the scene goes on and on, but the scene also is so enticing that you just kind of keep going. But you probably acknowledge that it is a long take. I actually, in Atomic Blonde, started to get tired of the long take. By the time they were in the car and down the street and people were wrecking, it was like, okay, this is just overblown now. This isn't, you're really abusing this long take. And obviously, it starts to look faker and faker the more action that happens in it and the more crashes that start to happen in it and stuff like that. And it just really kills it long after it's had any kind of effect whatsoever. And so that's really unfortunate. And it sucks that we've actually found a way to make action scenes really great, and movies like this are going to come along and basically just abuse it, like I said. So I only appreciated that so far. And then it just kind of, this movie feels so long. It's only about an hour 55, but and that's even before, this was one of those times where, while I was in the theater, it was where she says her line to Toby Jones at the very end, and the music started playing, and everybody got up. And it's like, and then, of course, the graffiti comes up and says 3 days later, and it's like, oh, there's still another scene. And even after that scene, there's still another scene. But even before that, the movie just feels really long. It really, there's like hardly any pacing to it whatsoever. Like, obviously the John Wick movies just fly by. And here, it just feels like the movie is just dragging itself along from one convoluted plot point to another. And then, it was like, well, what else do we do? We need to add something else to this character because she's bland as fuck. So what do we do? And so it's, when that lesbian scene came along, it was kind of like, okay, I see what happened here now. They didn't feel like they had enough in the movie, and they were trying to figure out what other directions they could go. So, they got a focus group together of 5th graders. And they're like, hey, 5th graders, we've got, like, action, and we've got fighting, and we've got swearing, and we've got all this cool stuff. We got blood hitting the camera multiple times. What's missing from this movie, 5th graders? And somebody probably stood up and said, lesbians, man. And then, voila, we have a movie now. And, like I said, that gives her character, like, one emotion in the whole movie, at least towards the very end. But apart from that, there's just really not a lot this movie has going for it, and really not a lot to offer. You can't help but admire some of its technical aspects, like even that goddamn long take. It's like, to be fair, they did put all that in there. I'm not sure if there were cheat cuts in it or not, but I did hear somewhere where, like, I guess they hired, like, stunt actors to actually play the parts that they're playing, so that when they can take tumbles down the stairs or whatever they've got to do, or throw themselves somewhere, that they can do that without having to cut, like, to where you don't have to add a stunt double into this action scene. So that's kind of clever and everything, but I mean, for the most part, it's just, it all feels so incredibly played out with the whole, the 80s are the coolest thing, and the constant soundtrack, and it's just, yeah, it's just really not a lot to go on here. I think also I was in a shitty mood because I had 2 people behind me the whole movie, and it was a mom and her kid. And this is one of the kids where every single time something happened, the kid had to ask about it, like he didn't fully understand. Every single damn thing. There is a scene where very clearly McAvoy shoots somebody, and right behind me I hear, did somebody just get shot? And it's like that through the whole movie, just every question. And not even questions sometimes, just random comments from this child that this mother had no intentions of fighting whatsoever. It's like, every time McAvoy was on screen, it's like, man, he cusses a lot. So there was that, but I think even with that, this movie would have been trying my patience a lot. There's also hardly a sense of humor in it. There's one funny line from Goodman that's a callback at the very end to the very first scene. And there is a moment when McAvoy has that non-fatal knife in his shoulder, and he accidentally runs into the wall behind him. But apart from that, and the movie does have those moments where it tries for humor and stuff like that, but it's just not really working. Like McAvoy's delivery of, I think I fucking love you. And it's like, really, McAvoy? Because I haven't seen a damn thing about this woman that isn't just complete stone-faced nothing. But whatever floats your boat. So, Yeah, pretty disappointing. Yeah, I could say disappointing, because I thought, like, even just the poster where it's just Charlize, but it kind of has that cool look to it. I did have just kind of a general cool vibe going into this movie, and it was really trying way too damn hard to get to that point. Something that, like I said, this director and his co-director in the past have done effortlessly. This movie cannot do. This movie is all effort and hardly any payoff. So yeah, but I guess at least I don't hate it. So there's that, I guess. Our second movie is going to be The Belko Experiment, a movie that was going to... James Gunn wrote this, and he wrote it before Super, and then he put it away because he was getting divorced from Jenna Fisher and wanted to take a break. And then I guess some executive or something came across the script again and said, dude, you should make this, especially since you're famous, because you got Guardians of the Galaxy and shit now. And I guess he agreed to it. They got a different director, but... so, basically, he had this idea, if you want to call it that, to where it's this kind of cross between... It's like the Stanford Prison Experiment idea with Battle Royale thrown in there, only it's in an office building. And they kind of try to play with that concept, and it's not necessarily... It's not like a horror movie or anything, it's just kind of a straight-up people fucking murdering people movie. Whatever genre you want to say that is. I struggle to say thriller, I struggle to say action. It's just people fucking killing each other. And even though it doesn't really have a horror vibe, I thought, anyway, despite all the blood and carnage, this is one of those movies where in the first minute, they do pounding on the car window jump scare that's in, like, every horror movie ever. I think it was just in that movie, The Other Side of the Door. And it's in every movie ever, but here, it just seemed really out of place, because this isn't even that kind of movie. But it's the first scene of the movie. So that immediately had me thinking, oh no, this is going to be a problem. I feel like this movie is going to be an issue. But it goes in, and we are introduced to our characters very, very quickly. There's supposed to be 80 people in this building, and we've got some recognizable faces. And this is one of those cases where hopefully you know the actors in it, because that's going to be the only way you remember these characters. We got John Gallagher Jr., who's kind of our main guy, who you know from 10 Cloverfield Lane and Short Term 12 and all that. Hush. There's John C. McGinley, Tony Goldwyn, Melanie Diaz, Michael Rooker, the guy that played Thomas Schiff in The Dark Knight. If you don't know these people, you're pretty much screwed. Because there are other people that pop up in the movie, but I couldn't necessarily keep track of them because I didn't recognize their actor. So, so we're introduced, because that's the thing, is it's kind of a double-edged sword here, because it's nice, because the reason that it sucks because we don't get to know the characters very well. You really have to just know their actor in order to know who you're following and where they stand. But the one thing where I guess this works is the reason that is the case is because this movie pretty much starts instantly. We have the bullshit window hitting thing, but then once they get to the building, it's just like this, like John C. McGinley's character is a creeper, and Tony Goldwyn's the boss, and John Gallagher Jr. is seeing this girl, and then boom, this movie's on. It just, right then, it just starts. And then it goes from there. And it just says, you know, like, kill 2 people, then kill 30 people, or your heads will explode. They have the things, like the collars in Battle Royale, where it's that they're implanted in their head, because the company just did that. And the company's supposedly been putting this together for about a year, and people were just like, well, there's nothing fishy about this, let's just do it. And so, yeah, that's what the movie is now. And it's really, one thing that really stands out about this movie in a disappointing way is when you see that James Gunn is the writer, and you imagine you've got all the, it's basically people killing people with office supplies, you think. So how creative are they going to get? This is the guy that made Slither that wrote this movie, and that movie is obviously fucking crazy and gruesome and all that shit. So what are they going to do? So there's really not a whole lot of creativity involved in that. In a movie that's all about killing people, the most creative we get is like some dude gets stuck in an elevator. Which, of course, we've seen 100 billion times. And the thing here is that this is our problem. Is you're probably wondering, well, how do they all die? Well, it's very simple. The security guards have a whole kind of arsenal of guns. And Tony Goldwyn and his guys get a hold of those, and just start fucking shooting everybody. And that's what a lot of the movie is. It's just people getting shot, and you're like, oh well, I guess so much for this movie having any creativity whatsoever. Because obviously the poster is him holding the tape dispenser, and so you're like, oh, but that's crazy. The scene's not as crazy as you think. And it's mostly, if people aren't getting shot, they're getting beaten to death or axed. And I think there's even just one axing, and it kind of feels like the end of Cabin in the Woods when everything comes out, only just take all the cool stuff out and take all the creativity out of it, and that's pretty much what this movie is at feature length. And so they do have those strong actors in there I was talking about, and there's some strong scenes in here, like the scene when Goldwyn has them all lined up and he's just executing them is really intense. And going into that, just anything that takes place during California Dreamin' is playing, is where this movie really kind of lives up to its crazy, but it's only for like one moment. Because this movie has so much potential to just be the craziest shit you have ever seen, and that's kind of how it was built up too before it was released. And then it's like there was hardly any thought put into it. It's exactly what it is, but just in a much lesser way than you would think. It's just people fucking killing each other, but they're not even creative about it. And like I said, from a guy that made a movie like Slither, you would expect more from a script of his, but that's not going to happen. And then, of course, also talking about James Gunn's style, is you would expect probably a lot of humor. And this movie's kind of a really good setup for really dark humor. I mean, it's that office setting. They kind of tried to play it up like Office Space meets Battle Royale or something. The only real thing this has in common with Office Space is like fucking John C. McGinley's. It's like, yeah, they sit in cubicles and they don't like their jobs, but that's literally like 30 seconds of the movie. And so you would think maybe there's a lot of humor in it, or really dark humor. Not really. And the only humor I even really remember isn't even dark humor. It's like when Sean Gunn's character wants to empty out the water coolers because he thinks they're been fucked with or something. And he's emptying the jug, and one guy just says, "That's gonna get moldy." And I think that's supposed to be one of our big comedic moments, I guess, in this movie where everybody's killing everybody, is, oh no, you're gonna make the walls moldy and the floor? I'm not really sure he was totally trying with this. That might be, he said, it's because he was getting divorced, he was going to take a break and put stuff away. I think there may be another reason he put this script away, but, well, I don't know, but there is a lot of stuff where it's a lot of it is actually kind of played seriously, and that's where I think it kind of falls short, because this movie could have been like this really, really damn over-the-top black comedy. Like, even then, even with all this carnage and an occasional inspired kill, there's really not a whole lot of an over-the-top quality to it. There's only so over-the-top you can go when people are just fucking shooting other people. It was sort of like, it felt less like Office Space meets Battle Royale, and more like Office Space meets Elephant. And that may sound better when you say it out loud than it actually does to see what this movie is doing. So, yeah, for the most part, they really, really wasted their potential in regards to that crazy factor, and then it eventually gets to a point to where we come to the conclusion of what's going on. And, well, for starters, the title pretty much tells you that, and like I said, you can look at the Stanford Prison Experiment. It's basically the old Twilight Zone episode, The Monsters Are Due on Maple Street, and it's that message that's been done to death, that can be taken as far back as an episode of the original Twilight Zone, and maybe even farther back. So in regards to killing and carnage and characters and a message, this movie has absolutely nothing to add. It's just here to be another movie that has massive amounts of bloodshed in it, and it's probably forgotten again. Despite the fact that it, of course, ends on a cliffhanger, because why wouldn't it? Another problem this movie actually has is, there's never really... There are some moments where there'll be a bit of a surprise kill, where it's somebody that you may not necessarily be expecting to die in that moment. But even so, it's kind of one of those cases where before any of the carnage even starts and we're just getting to know the characters, it's... Throughout the movie, there's never really any doubt from the audience in regards to who's going to be the last one. We kind of pretty much know that the whole time. And there's really nothing that ever deviates from that or makes us think that it's not going to be that person. It always just kind of... We always just kind of know that that's where it's going to go. So that's really... Like, this person I'm talking about, if they had been killed, like, halfway through, this movie probably would have been a lot more intense. Because it would have really set up this, holy shit, who's expendable, who's going to get out of this thing. But no, we pretty much know the whole time who's going to be the one that gets out of this. And that's kind of a fatal flaw of the movie. That's what takes away from a lot of it. And like I was saying, as far as the material and the frequently explored territory, the movie never feels like going out of its way to go beyond that. It's just pretty much... This whole movie is just at surface level and doesn't want to go any farther. Just wants to do its bloodshed thing and do its little cool reveal thing, and then it's done. So there was really... I don't think there was any particular reason for a production company to pull this out of James Gunn's drawer, but... it's not a bad movie. Like, it's not as bad as I may be making it sound right now. Like, it's totally tolerable, especially if you're into the whole bloodshed thing, but it just feels like so many wasted opportunities is the problem. Especially with some of the actors they got in here. Michael Rooker is in this for like 2 minutes. Like, the whole movie I was sitting here wondering, why was that... I know the James Gunn connection, he's in like every James Gunn movie ever, but it's like... Can you give him a bigger part? Like, I love that John C. McGinley's in it, and I like the part he plays, but honestly, no offense to McGinley, that was totally a Michael Rooker part he was playing. Like, that really should have been Rooker's part that McGinley was playing, but, and McGinley, I could see McGinley doing Goldblum's part, actually, and then, so but it's this never-ending chain of where does the other person go, but, yeah, that's the point I'm trying to make, is this movie is just really a whole lot of wasted potential, and does... really not near enough, considering what it could have done with its setup. So I think it's probably gonna disappoint a lot of people, especially, like, even though we do get the bloodshed and all that, I do feel like people who really love that stuff are still gonna be disappointed because they're expecting something a little more hardcore than just people getting shot in the head frequently. So yeah. Even when the things in their heads go off, it's so much like just they're getting shot that for when that starts happening the first time, the characters actually think they're getting shot. So yeah, that's kind of a... I don't know. I actually wasn't really expecting a whole lot out of the movie anyway, even being a James Gunn script, but yeah, it just really didn't want to do much with itself except just be what it is. And in some cases that would be commendable. In this case, no, it just makes you really realize what the movie could have been and what it just ultimately isn't at all. So, let's go on to our last movie, which is Black Butterfly, which I didn't know existed until it was in Redbox, but I saw Antonio Banderas' name. I was like, well, we'll check that out, because I love Antonio Banderas a lot. I think he's just one of the most charismatic motherfuckers you will ever see, and he is amazing. How he didn't get an Oscar nomination for Evita is still beyond me, but... So, we start off, and he is a screenwriter. And it was kind of giving me vibes of The Hunted a little bit when we get that start where Tommy Lee Jones is in a little isolated cabin and all that, and he's just doing his thing. That's kind of what I got the vibe of Banderas' character here. And then we have this setup where, I assume most people haven't heard of this, so I'll go ahead and tell you the setup. We've got two things going on here. We've got Banderas as this screenwriter whose wife has just left him, so he's basically isolated in the middle of nowhere. And in the area, there's been a serial killer on the loose murdering women. So the movie jumps around a lot here at the start, because we've got Banderas at his typewriter not knowing what he's going to do, and then we've got this guy whose wife goes missing, and he's looking for her and we can't find her, and then we're back to Banderas, and it's just all... Like, I feel like this guy with the missing wife should have been the opening scene. But alas, no. So, but then we get, I do get why eventually they did that though, but, yes. God, we'll get to that. But, so, and then Banderas is driving, and he ends up pissing off a truck driver with his road rage. And then he and that truck driver end up meeting at a diner, and then while they're getting into an altercation, Jonathan Rhys-Meyers materializes and extinguishes the conflict by taking the guy outside and threatening him. And so at this point, he and Jonathan Rhys-Meyers, he gives him a ride. He's like a drifter, so Banderas says he'll give him a ride, and Myers says, well, I'll go wherever you're going. So he takes Myers home with him, and then he like fixes his shit and makes him dinner and stuff to pay back for just letting him stay there. And with this kind of setup, you pretty much know where it's going, right? So there's that. And then as the movie goes on, and there's another character in here who is, Banderas is like agent or something, who is Piper Perabo. And it basically becomes this two-person story where Myers sticks around the house, but he just has this real shady quality about him. And Banderas is trying to write a new script, and he's got a deadline. So basically, it's a lot like, there's a movie out there called Collaborator that's really good, that has Martin Donovan and David Morse, and Martin Donovan directed it too. And it's pretty much this exact same setup, where this guy, who may or may not be super, super shady, is going to help this guy basically see reality, so he can write his characters realistically and really get back into the flow and kind of be... Myers is going to kind of try to be his muse and really help him through this and show him the reality, however dark that may end up being. He may, go into his bedroom in the middle of the night and put a knife to his throat and say, how you reacted to this is what you should put in your script when people are in danger. Good night. And then it goes on this for a long time, and the movie works because all we really have to focus on are these two performances between Banderas and Myers, and these two really go into these characters and really make it... Myers especially is really good in this. And he really makes this character kind of... you're always kind of uncertain about him, but with the setup, you kind of always have it in your head. It's like, this guy has probably killed people. And the way that kind of builds, and then eventually it gets into thriller territory, but the thing is you kind of start to wonder... This is one of those movies where you constantly ask yourself why characters make the decisions that they do. This will be a movie that probably drives a lot of people crazy if they're not into it from the start. I was into it because I thought Banderas and Myers were really selling the back and forth between them, and really just their performances were enough to grab me to where I could acknowledge the stuff where I had a lot of questions, but then it was just... I just let it go. But then, it does get to a point to where you're like, why is Banderas still keeping him around? Because the shadiness obviously is eventually going to get off the charts. Before finally, things come to light and it pretty much starts to go in the direction we thought it was going to go. And the whole time you're asking, another movie it reminds me a lot of is a fairly recent movie called Standoff that has Lawrence Fishburne and Thomas Jane, where it's just the two of them and a girl in a house, and Thomas Jane's upstairs and Lawrence Fishburne's downstairs, and they're just kind of waiting it out, and whoever sees the other first is going to shoot the other, and we're just kind of waiting for that to happen. There's a lot of that movie in this too, and we're just kind of waiting to see which character's going to pounce first. And it can be very intriguing. Like I said, it's one of those movies where you got to really not necessarily think about why is he still here? It does make you question it for a long time. It's like, he seriously just took the stranger in like it was nothing. But like I said, the performances really kept me engaged enough to where I was able to just kind of go with it. But then something happens here, where even after we've gone through all the red flags that we just passed right by, and the movie really reaches its point to where it pretty much goes exactly in the direction we thought it was going to go, something happens. Now, if everything I have said up to this point sounds remotely interesting, to the point that you maybe might check this movie out at some point, you're not going to want to hear anything from beyond this point. So that is your warning. So I am going to go on now. I'm not going to outright spoil anything, but like I was saying, if this interests you up to this point, you're not going to want to hear the rest of this. So this is one of those movies, now that you've been warned, that has a big old twist in it. And it's one of those twists where it was kind of like, it occurred to me at the very beginning, it'd be kind of cool if that was the case. And then I just kind of forgot about it, and then it comes to this. But then it takes it a step further, and it's like this twist is bigger than it initially set up. And the thing is it actually made sense. Like, it's a really good twist, this whole thing that we have. And I was like, okay. And then and the way it keeps going in that direction, it was kind of like, all right, this movie took a really interesting turn, and I kind of like, this is kind of a lot better than it was. Like, it's better after the twist than it was before. There's only one problem. As you know, with a lot of movies that are standard, if they accomplish one big twist, they want to go one more step. And the last 30 seconds of this movie kind of totally ruins it. And because they just couldn't, they were just salivating for more. They just wanted to go one step further. It wasn't enough that they were going in a really good direction, that when you looked back at everything else, made sense. And then it's just, like, even those moments where you question, like, why would they do this and why would they do this? For the most part, unless I'm really overlooking something, this first twist answers those questions. And it all comes together in a really nice way. But once again, they just have to go for it. They have to really, really go for it. And just fuck it all over. And it's just, this is one of those days where it's just like, I was on your side, man. I was there for you. I set it to the side when I had questions. And this is how you repay me. It just fucked you so hard. I hate you. Now, as I was saying, I really like that first twist, and the performances are engaging enough to where I think this is a decent movie. I do. And the tension is there, even though it's a little bit, you know, we always kind of know the direction it's going to go, until it's not. But it's just, it was in a really, really good place, and then it just kind of took it back to where it was, with this last 30 seconds, and that's a bummer. So, yeah, I know it's going to be a movie that pisses so many people off. It really is, and people are going to hate it. They're going to probably come away saying it's, you know, one of the worst movies they've ever seen or something, and yeah, but the thing is I have to say that I was into it for most of it, and then it's just, yeah, I can't. So, alright, so I think that's going to do it for this. So, not the best week, of course, but next week there's going to be, I'm going to do my best to see two. I would like to see both The Dark Tower and Detroit. And there's going to be some interesting stuff as well, like I think Colossal and The Circle come out, as well as that Katherine Heigl thriller or whatever that was. So I will be looking into those as well. So that should be all kinds of fun. So, all kinds of different fun. And then, of course, the next versus you're going to be getting is that one I talked about, where we're going to go into a movie I love versus a movie I hate, and see how that turns out. So, in the meantime, that's what we're doing. That's what this week was. And, oh yeah, I forgot to mention also, Black Butterfly is also based on a French movie that I have not seen, so I'm not sure what the differences are there. I would like, it could potentially be a totally different movie. It could totally be the exact same movie. I could see it going either way, to be honest. So if that makes Black Butterfly seem a little more interesting too, or if you just want to check out that French movie instead. I think it's the same title, just in French, like Papillon Noir or something. So, yeah, that's it. That's it for this week.